Our ego tries to keep us within our present paradigm because it cannot control us in the realm of the unknown outside, whether you call it cracking or opening, expanding awareness. The ego cannot control you outside of that. And that's where all the goodies are. That's where your potential is. That's where there are parts of you don't even know about yet that are trying to come forward. Ego would keep you within a little small paradigm and let your experience be your loop of reality. And you'll say, well, this happened to me, and this is the way I see life. But you're only seeing a limited perception of life. Sometimes what happens is a crisis will crack us open, and then suddenly we get an insight. Where did that come from? I often teach that your pain pushes you until your vision pulls you. And so a crisis can open you up, and then you see, oh, there's more than who I thought I was, and there's more to what life is.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michael Beckwith. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here and have a great conversation with you.
I've been circulating around your orbit, which I think is a sign of successful orbiting when you don't know that I'm doing it. You know, but I've known of your work. I've been to the Agape Center, so I've known of your work for, I want to say about 10 years, probably somewhere around that. And I really love my experience of being in that center, especially having grown up Catholic, was I had this rejection of the experience of church or God because I just felt like there was judgment associated with that. And when I got to experience your center, which my friend invited me to, I felt a healing of that. Like now I was in a place that there was no judgment. It was like just love, which Agape made sense as the name. So I wanted to start off by asking, why do you think that we tend to have a resistance to spirituality, or we even try to protect or prepare people for a conversation by saying, oh, we're going to go into woo-woo? So why do you think that is?
Basically, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you had an opportunity to visit us at Agape. I think that it used to be said years ago that, you don't want to enter into conversation about religion or politics because people can get kind of cantankerous about those particular subjects. But spirituality, as opposed to religion, because they're not necessarily the same thing. Religion is, a set of beliefs, dogmas, doctrines, etc., that can oftentimes lead to separation. And as you said, sometimes carries with it the burden of guilt and judgment and things of that particular nature. Whereas spirituality is really a way to come back into our true nature. And I think that people avoid that because until recently, it's become very difficult to prove. It's invisible, it's formless, it's timeless. You can't take a picture of it. You can't scientifically prove that there's something that has anything to do with spirituality. But over the last 20 years, with the rise of epigenetics and quantum physics and things of that particular nature, quantum physicists are sounding exactly like metaphysicians. There's this unified field. It's conscious of itself. It's everywhere, and then you have a definition of the presence of God, not the guy in the sky God, not the anthropomorphic God, but a presence that's never an absence. It's timeless. It's formless. It's everywhere. It's omnipotent. So you see the quantum physicists and you see the metaphysicians or mystics or people on that path, spiritual path, kind of using the same language interchangeably these days. And so now it's becoming less difficult to have that conversation because some people like things to be backed up by the science of the day. And so we now have the science of the day. I've been teaching over 40 years, and a lot of this science didn't exist when I was first articulating these spiritual principles. Now it exists. One of my great friends is Bruce Lipton, the godfather of epigenetics. Joe Dispenza has spoken at Agape, And so I think we're entering into a time where spirituality and science are getting married again. They had a divorce in the Middle Ages when the church dominated everything and kicked science out of the club. But now we're in a time in which it's coming back together, and science and spirituality, I think, are pointing in the same direction. Just the nuance of language is a bit different, you see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about somehow the act of faith. Like when I think about that presented as a religious idea, it was like your faith in God. Like you have to believe in this thing that we can't measure, we can't. And yet there seems to be a yearning to be involved in something, community greater than, connected to others. Like being able to place like it's almost like we need to have the science to say, oh, it's actually real, the thing you feel. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, science research shows that people in a spiritual community have a greater longevity rate. They have a greater health rate. They have less mental illness. They have less emotional anxiety because they're in a community of people that are on some level trying to be better, some level trying to make some kind of connection, whatever the religion may be. You know, when they come together in community and they pray together, they sing together, or they chant together, or whatever the particular, ways of entering into that space is, research says those people live longer. And they have a greater sense of liveliness as they enter into their advanced ages, and they don't feel so alone. The suicide rate is down in people who have a sense of community. So, I think there is a yearning for belonging. And as long as that yearning doesn't become a pathology where there's neediness or, where people can take advantage of that, of people like that, you see. But the spiritual community, I've said over the years that authentic spiritual community grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. We're bombarded every single day. If people go on social media or they watch the regular news, we're bombarded with the lowest common denominator of the human experience. How many robberies happened today? How many people got killed? There's all kinds of, that's probably 90% of the news. But if you have some level of spiritual community, you become immune. You don't just put your head in this ground and pretend nothing's happening, but you become immune to that because the other qualities of love, compassion, generosity, beauty, creativity, they become real to you. And so you have a kind of a buffer because those qualities, even though you can't see them, are real. And so I call it, you become kind of a spiritual Teflon man or woman. So you're able to be in that world and see all that stuff, but you're of a higher frequency. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not bypassing or denying what's going on in the world, but rather you're able to, your spiritual muscle, your sense of self, your sense of community is so strong that you can be witness to those things, but you don't become the energetic or the suffering or the pain of that. Is that?
Absolutely. You don't, there's sympathy, there's empathy, and there's compassion. Sympathy is, I know how you feel. Empathy is I'll feel for you. Compassion is I'm going to do whatever my calling is to eliminate suffering. So if I'm full to overflowing with love or compassion or peace, that which you learn in all religions, then I'm going to bring that to the world. I may not be able to do everything, but I can do something because I'm connected. Some people would call it a higher power. I'm connected to my real authentic self, but I'm connected to those qualities. So I'm not in sympathy with the lower frequencies of life, but I'm not bypassing it. But I'm more in compassion. Compassion is a very high form of love. Compassion is the understanding of the lack of understanding. So when I see all kinds of mental, emotional debris, hate, etc. in the world, that an individual is operating from hate is operating from a very immature state of consciousness. So compassion allows me to have an understanding of that lack of understanding. So spirituality, when it's proper spirituality, you're more of imbued with the confidence that you can move through the stresses and the traumas and the strains of life and you're going to grow in it, and you're going to find your way of giving your gift, whatever your gift is. As an educator, podcast host, an athlete, teacher, whatever your gift is, it's more imbued with a response from a higher consciousness rather than merely a reaction to the negativity that we see.
That's so beautiful. So you become a reference point in some sense of alignment, of love, of unconditional love, of this, like, which I think we often confuse compassion with tolerance, you know?
Yeah, tolerance is a little bit less than compassion. If you've studied any of Gandhi's works, you know, he would say in substance that at one level you learn how to tolerate people, you tolerate things, and then you grow into actually appreciating people. You know, whether you agree with them or not. It's not about a political alignment. It's more about understanding that the other person is a human being. You know, they have their perceptions, their positionalities. You move from just tolerating somebody to actually growing into a higher level of appreciation, and then you grow from there into compassion. So if somebody is really off, let's say, you still have a compassion. If somebody is a hater, you know, something must have happened that allowed that individuals to wake up one day and hate Black people or gay people or hate the Democrats or hate the Republicans. You can disagree with all of that.
Right.
But to go into a deep sense of hate, there's something not in alignment there.
Feels like there's a lot of material available on the internet for us to step into that.
Oh, yeah.
State.
Sometimes we call the internet the hatosphere. The haternet, you know, because people can remain anonymous and then just kind of attack people. I mean, I've seen people attack people just because they like different kind of music.
Right.
Saying, what is going on? She or he just likes a different kind of music and you hate them. You're going to berate them. No, it can become the hatosphere sometimes.
Has your journey, like, have you always been connected to spirituality and desired to be a teacher of meditation and that kind of stuff? Like, what was your journey to finding this?
Well, as a young boy, I had connection. I had a lot of different inner experiences, but I would quickly seek to normalize myself to be with my peers, you see. I've had different mystical experiences. When I look back, I can see what they were from this vantage point. But at the time, it just seemed too odd for me to like really live into it. I can remember one time, my family's from Washington, D.C. My father brought our family, my mother and myself, to Los Angeles when I was a young boy. But I would go back to D.C. for the summer to see my grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. So I'm there on my birthday. I think I'm about I'm 11. And I go to the store for my grandmother. And I'm in one aisle shopping for her. On the next aisle, there's a stock boy. I see it in my mind. I see that he's about to drop the baby food. And I run around and I catch it. And he looks at me and he says, how did you know I was dropping the baby food? And I couldn't explain. I said, I don't know. I saw it. So on my way home, I have the groceries. My uncle, my mother, and my grandmother are sitting on the stoop and they're looking at me. And I know my mother's looking at her son. My grandmother is looking at her grandson. My uncle is looking at his nephew. But at that moment, I wasn't any of those things. I was this state of consciousness. Now, keep in mind, I didn't have this language then.
Yeah.
I was something else. I was in this very expanded space. And I'm walking towards them and I'm thinking, oh my God, they think I'm Michael, you know, and what am I going to do? And I got closer and closer and closer. And I can remember this. As soon as I got really close to them, I shrunk and I became what I thought they wanted me to be. A nephew, a grandson, and a son. And so later on that year, I was nominated to be the treasurer of my elementary school. And at the end of the week, we had to speak in front of an assembly. I did not want to do this, but the teacher would not allow me to decline the nomination. So anyway, something happened. I got up to speak and all of this energy started flowing through me. And I started talking about being an excellent student and all of this stuff started flowing. And I sat down and the audience was stunned. And I was sitting there like embarrassed, like what happened? So all that week, I tried to prove that I was normal. I got in fights, not on purpose, but I just allowed my lower nature to take over. And so anyway, I'm saying that to say there were a number of experiences when I was younger that pointed to this deep spirituality, but I would shrink it. And then when I was a senior at USC, I was having a number of inner experiences, but I hadn't done any spiritual study or anything like that. I was a psychobiology major. I was going to go to med school. And so I'm hearing voices, I'm seeing visions, all these things are going on. I'm thinking to myself, this is pathological. This is years ago. This is before transpersonal psychology. This is for all the things that we now have available. And so the first thing I did is I stopped smoking weed. I said, this has got to be the weed. It's causing all this stuff. I stopped smoking weed, and the experiences kept expanding until one night I had a series of dreams. No, one dream every night. And in this dream, these three men were way in the distance, and they were approaching me, but I would always wake up before they would get too close. But every night they were a little bit closer. So one night I can see the makeup of their face. They're really close. And I looked to my right, and there was a small tent, and thousands of people were trying to fit into this small tent. And I knew every single person in line. I'm in this lucid dream. And I said, these men can't hurt me. I have all of my friends here. And one by one, everyone turned their back on me. Two of the men held me down, and one plunged a knife in my heart. The pain was excruciating physically and emotionally, and I died. And when I woke up, I could see that I was surrounded by this radiant beauty, this love, the love is so magnificent and magnified. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And the beauty was everywhere. The lint on the rug was glowing with luminosity.
Wow.
And after that, I couldn't normalize myself. I couldn't go back into what I had done when I was a kid. And so I went on a research project to find out what had happened to me. And then that's when I began to bump into the mystical teachings of Gautama the Buddha, Jesus the Christ, Zoroaster, Walter Russell, all of these beings. And I saw a similar vibe that allowed me to remain sane while this was integrating into my life. You know, I had to integrate. It took years to integrate it, you know. And then I wasn't planning on being a public person. I wasn't planning on establishing a spiritual community. That wasn't in, but I had this intense love of the presence. Now, I didn't use the word God because I come from agnostic, kind of an atheistic kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. But the presence to me was real, but I didn't call it God. I called it love, beauty, because that's the way it came to me. It was love and it was beauty. And then later on, it expanded to love, beauty, intelligence. And it wasn't until a number of years later that I was able to embrace the word God again, because it didn't mean a man in the sky. It didn't necessarily emanate from the limited religious points of view, but it was a good word. It was a good word for me again after all the dust was wiped off of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that for me too, that there was like a healing of the relationship to that word, because now I was deciding what my relationship to something greater was. Although I find like the story that you're sharing, what I find really resonant for me is that it seems like we're touched by these moments, right? Like when you're a kid and you have this really expansive experience walking up to a porch, and then you feel yourself like collapse.
Right.
Do you think a lot of us collapse before we like don't get to touch that expansive nature? So it's like the experience we're having is just constraint, and like what is the symptom of that it's trying to move back into you, like you're trying to be cracked? Because I feel like man, we have all these addictions, and if we use social media, we have all these ways that we avoid the cracking. What do you think to the people?
You're describing it exactly the way it is. We live in we have a certain perception or paradigm. That paradigm produces our experience. That experience gives us feedback and says it's real. So our ego tries to keep us within our present paradigm because it cannot control us in the realm of the unknown. The realm of the unknown outside, whether you call it cracking or opening, expanding awareness, the ego cannot control you outside of that. And that's where all the goodies are. That's where your potential is. That's where there are parts of you don't even know about yet that are trying to come forward. But the ego would keep you within a little small paradigm and let your experience be your loop of reality. And you'll say, well, this happened to me, and this is the way I see life. But you're only seeing a limited perception of life. And so every single day there's a broadcast every day trying to get to us, every day. When we go to bed at night, we leave our body and we have a whole nother reality. Some of it remember, some of it we don't remember. But sometimes what happens is a crisis will crack us open. And then we're at our wits' end, and then suddenly we get an insight. Where did that come from? Or a lot of people that go into surgery and then they suddenly leave their body and they see the surgeon working on them, and they start to realize, oh, there's something more. I'm not just my body, so crisis, I often teach that your pain pushes you until your vision pulls you. And so a crisis can open you up, and then you see, oh, there's more than who I thought I was. And there's more to what life is. It's not just what I thought it to be. It's not just what was handed down by parental fantasy or religious fantasies or societal fantasies. There's way more to life. And then once a person gets a little interested, then I think things start to change. Serendipity starts to happen. Coincidences start to take place. You start to meet people. You start to be open to different kind of conversations. Oh, there's more to life than just, I'm going to get up every day. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to save money. I have enough money in the bank. I'm going to retire. I'm going to die. There's something way more to that. But many people live in just 3 dimensions. I like to say sometimes they're dimensionally challenged because there's way more dimensions than 3.
We're like trapped in the 3D, which makes sense because the emotional reactivity, the triggers, I don't like the music you listen to,
right.
Even the reactivity to someone criticizing our music, that
right.
all of a sudden now my music is somehow invalidated because some person doesn't even have a profile picture on whose whole purpose is to instigate. They might even not be a real person. They could just be a bot. Right? Whose whole job is to develop you spiritually.
Could be, because crisis and triggers, become an opening to transformation. So it absolutely could be. Well, in the universal sense, it is, because everything is actually working together for our awakening, whether we like it or don't like it in the moment. The universe is progressive. So everything is all working on our behalf when we stop fighting it, you see. Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think are the spiritual, or maybe that's not the right word, but the technologies that we can use to begin, like if we're having that feeling of the crisis or the trigger that's pushing who we think we are, what we think life is actually about, that we're leading to these curiosities that you're talking about, asking bigger questions. What are some techniques or technologies we can use to begin to dance in that scary, etheric, because it feels like if you've been in the 3D, 4, 5, 6, 7 is like, what are you talking about?
Well, you mentioned one of the great technologies. The questions that we ask are very important, because the average individual has a tendency to ask disempowering questions. What's wrong? Who's to blame? Why me? And if the way the universe operates, the way I see it, by law, will answer any question that you ask. So if you ask a disempowering question, you're going to get answers at that level. So if a crisis is afoot, if you're going through something, you have to up-level your questioning. You have to ask things like, what gift am I being called to give right now? What blessing is under this particular challenge? What's trying to emerge in my life right now? And if you ask that question sincerely, then you'll start to get intuitive hits, inner answers. Everyone's unique, so everyone will get their answer differently. Some people will see something, hear something, feel something. You start to be moved in a different direction. You'll start to expand your awareness because your question has evolved. Because most people are saying, somebody else is to blame. What's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? They live at the level of victimhood. But if we up-level our questioning, answers will come in a language and in a way that we can understand. I was hard-headed, I think. So much when I was cracked open, it was very dramatic for me.
You needed that.
I wasn't going to walk into anybody's spiritual community or church. I was anathema. I was like, I'm not going any place like that. People are sitting around, that wasn't my thing, And interestingly enough, even after I cracked open and I was getting all this information, my mother was telling me about a metaphysical community that I would like. She would say, they talk like you. I said, Mom, I'm not going to anything like that. I'm good. I'm going direct, And then one day I went and the teacher got up and said, he went a little late. And the teacher said, he was already speaking. He said, heaven and hell aren't merely places. They're states of consciousness. And I shouted out, he's right. They teach truth in church. What? When did this happen?
What was it like then for you, that journey of stepping into this calling? Like, what did the path look like? What did the nudges, were they really explicit? Were they,
there were a couple of things that happened. One, when I was at USC, I had developed, it just kind of blew up, a cottage industry of selling weed. At the beginning, I didn't
know
weed.
It was going to go this way. I really like this. That was a great story.
I was just selling a little bit just to have mine for free, but it just grew exponentially to the point where I was paying tuition cash, and I had people working for me in Nashville, Atlanta, LA. I mean, it was big. I had making a lot of money. And so one day I'm sitting, and I said, "This is not my destiny. I'm not going to be selling weed, And so I was receiving my last distribution, and the person that worked for me that had a stash house was out of town. So it was one of the only times that I had this much weed in my house. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden my solar plexus went crazy. And I was telling the guy, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not my destiny. I'm through with this. And I'm starting to have these inner experiences. At the time, I didn't know they were connected. And so I got busted on my last deal, the very last deal. I felt something was happening, but I didn't know what it was. I said, we have to leave the house right now. Now, I didn't know this consciously what was happening, but I said, we got to leave. So he left. He drove back to San Diego, Indio. And I'm driving down the street, and the police ran me off the road, searched my car. There was nothing there. They asked me where I lived. And on my address, I still had my parents' address. So I said, I live down the street, my parents right there. And they said, you don't live over here somewhere? I said, nope, because I knew that's where the weed was. Mm-hmm. And anyway, they systematically went into every single house on the other side of the street until they found where the marijuana was in my house. They said, it's in here. And they brought me there. And they arrested me. They took me down to the police station. Then they went and got a search warrant. Then they came back and arrested me. They didn't arrest me the first time. They actually held me. Then they arrested me with the weed. Mm. So that's not even the story. Story is I was told, so I've had this awakening, okay? So I was told that I was going to walk free. I was going to have no record. My friends thought I was crazy. They said, they caught you with weed and guns in your house. The local want to send you to jail. The feds want to send you to prison for the guns you had illegally. I said, I'm walking free. I said, it's just not even going to be a part of my experience. So people just thought I had freaked out. So I go to court. I hired a man by the name of Harry Weiss, who was the big-time attorney at the time. And I'm reading meditation books in court. I have no concern about what's going on up there because I've already been told I'm walking free. So I'm sitting there reading. I'm reading a book called Chaotic Meditation by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. He only had one book at the time. It was a pamphlet. And so, we're going on, continuances, coming back to court, delays. And so finally, the assistant to my attorney is interviewing a motorcycle cop and asking him why they went to this house. Now, the motorcycle cop wasn't even there, so I don't even know what that was even about. So he asked him, why did you go to this man's house? He says, well, we heard from the informant that a drug deal was going down, so we got a search warrant. We staked out the house, and as soon as we saw the delivery, we went in and arrested him. And so the attorney says, that's hearsay evidence. We demand that the informant be brought to court and identify the accused. And so the judge calls the prosecutors and the defense attorneys to the bench and says, I need the informant here within 3 days. So we come back to court 3 days later, and the prosecutor says, Your Honor, the informant will not come. He's afraid for his life. And the judge says, Mr. Beckwith, I have no other recourse but to set you free. I hope I never see you in my courtroom again. I said, Your Honor, you never will. The assistant attorney was Robert Shapiro.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, he was a young dude. He was the assistant attorney. That was Robert Shapiro, was the assistant to Harry Weiss. And I left court. I'd already given up smoking. Never smoked again. Like one more time in my life, years later, it shrunk my consciousness. And went on so that was a big miracle. And subsequently, there were another number of others after that. But the nudge in terms of me finally answering a call to do what I'm doing, I was sitting in my living room one day, and at this particular time, I was unemployed. I said, I just sat in my living room meditating. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do with my life? I mean, I'm in total love with this presence. The presence is more real to me than the chair I'm sitting on. It's just very real. I'm being taught at night when I leave my body. It's all kinds of things that seem weird to people, but it's how I live my life. So I said, okay, what do you want me to do? So two things happened. One, I received some mail with a check in it that was almost a little bit more than every bill that I had. And it was I used to work for the mayor's office, and they had miscalculated something. So a couple of years later, I get this check, and I paid off all my bills. Secondly, the phone rang. And it was this lady on the phone, and she said, we went to high school together, and I'm having some deep issues. And I opened up the high school annual, and your face was there with your phone number underneath, and God told me to call you that you would help me. And I said, really? So she calls, and I would counsel her over the phone. I would pray for her, and she would send donations to me. And then she would start telling other people about what was happening in her life based on her conversations with me. So this kind of grew. And one day I was at a restaurant. I was going into a restaurant, and I saw her. I hadn't seen her up to this time. It was all on the phone. And I said her name, and she looked at me like a deer in headlights, and she took off because I think she was embarrassed by telling me all of her deep, dark secrets. and having me help her work through it. And it was easy for her to do it over the phone to this anonymous guy that she went to high school with. And then I thought about it. When I was in high school, I didn't have that phone number. And I never put my phone number in my annual. It was my parents' phone number when I was in high school. We didn't have cell phones and things of that particular nature. I said, well, how do you, my phone number was unlisted. So I said, okay, either God gave her my phone number or she kind of got it from somewhere, but I don't know where she got it. However, none of that mattered to me. It's like, I'm supposed to do this. Mm-hmm. So when I went to that spiritual community that I mentioned earlier, they had licensing of spiritual therapists. So I immediately began to take classes. I became a therapist, spiritual therapist. I used to see 6 to 8 people every single day, 5-6 days a week.
Wow.
And I started doing these seminars with a partner of mine before seminars were popular. And then I got a job working as this director of training at a world ministry of prayer. And then I was getting these nudges to start a community, of which I resisted for a long time. I didn't want to do that. I was not a public person. I'll teach you how to meditate. I'll counsel with you. I'll pray with you. But I didn't want to start a community. I didn't want to start a church, a community, or whatever. And my world started closing down. And I went to Puerto Vallarta, and I actually had a vision of agape. I saw this vision. It was one vision. Then I had another vision in a dream in which I was very tiny. And in this dream, I'm walking down the street, and there's this building, and there's all of this music and laughter, enthusiasm and love coming out of this building. And the voice inside says, this is what we want you to do. And I said, how am I going to do that? And the voice said, you say yes, and we'll do the rest. And so eventually what I did is I started a vision group in my living room, about 12 people to vision. I started what is called the vision process, to actually vision what the community would look like and who we needed to be in order for this community to unfold. And then I started a community out of nothing. Because I had 3 groups of people. The people that were my clients that were coming to see me, people that I was doing a training program. I was now a teacher, training people how to be spiritual therapists. And there was a third group of people, people who had taken my seminars. So the people always say to me, if you ever start something, I'm going to be there. And I'd always say, I'm not going to start anything. I don't feel that, So I called them. About 12 of them wanted to be a part of this vision group. And then when I started, the first day of the center was November 30th, 1986. That was the first public service after months of meditation, months of doing the vision process. Had about 400 people show up.
Wow.
And people that knew me and a lot of people came from other communities just to support. So we ended up with a base of about 50 after the first day, and it's grown from there. So there was an incremental me giving up resistance, growing to expand my awareness and integrate these higher frequencies without bypassing Michael, because it's easy for people to go into altered states, but who they are doesn't change. It's an interesting kind of bypass that happens. And as a matter of fact, just to give you an understanding, at the early part of those early experiences, I actually changed my name. My name was Param Atman. And I'm just now telling that part of the story of my life, because I never really talked about it that much. And I had a little magazine that came out. And I'd go into this higher state. And anyway, I became aware that Michael, on a personality level, wasn't necessarily integrating. I could just kind of leave and go and then bring information, like a channel, I kind of like channel like that. And so I took Michael back and let Michael grow through his stuff he needed to grow through, his own insecurities, his own fears, his own traumas, whatever, so that would be not sublimated or suppressed, but would actually be used as grist for the mill to grow. So there'd be more like a integration, not just people channeling, going into higher states, but you have to integrate that so you become fully human at the same time allowing the divine to take place. I know I've talked a lot.
That's beautiful.
A lot of material, but yeah.
No, that makes sense. That instead of only experiencing the divine when you go into this experience of channeling, there's actually not just an integration of what you're learning through the channeling, but actually there's a co-conversation that's happening through the learnings of your own being. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's integration is extremely important. So you don't use these things to run away from the issues that you have as a human being. You actually embrace those issues. You actually embrace them, and then the higher frequencies help heal it. So it's not just burying in them, and they'll pop out somewhere unconsciously, And so that became very important to me to do intense inner spiritual therapy, so to speak, inner work. A lot of things that I see now that are pretty popular in the world, I was doing that in my garage by myself. You know what I mean? And integrating. And there's a story of my life where I could tell there's a difference. I can describe what transformation is. Like, I used to go to Big Bear and meditate by myself. So one time I was meditating outside, and this scroll rolled out of the sky, and it said, Michael Beckwith to speak at this church in Tacoma, Washington. And then it disappeared. And so I wrote it down in my journal. I thought that was cute. And wow, I never publicly spoke before. And so when I got home, the phone rang. There was a guy named Bill, and he said, we want you to come speak at our church. I said, I know, I saw the scroll. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, nothing. I didn't mean to say that. And I said, but at this time, I didn't have any licenses. I didn't have a ministerial license. I didn't have the metaphysical doctorate. I didn't have the practitioner. All the stuff that I have now, I didn't have any of it. I was just a guy who loved the presence and was helping people. And he says, we know you don't. We know. I said, but why are you asking me to speak? He said, we saw you at this spiritual conference. We really appreciated your vibe. We appreciated what you were saying and how you were teaching. We just think you'd be perfect to come teach to us because our minister is retired. We don't have anybody. I said, okay. So when I hung up the phone, I got really, really scared and nervous because I'd never done anything like this before. Who am I to go out and tell people about God? I was nervous. So I remember laying down on my couch. It's a green couch. And I was so nervous. And I left my body. And I looked back at Michael and I said, Michael doesn't quite understand yet. He doesn't understand that. When I said the word that, I was back in the body again, nervous. So anyway, I go to Tacoma and I speak and energy flows. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Everything beyond my imagination, what happened there. So then that was in 1979. That's when that took place.
Wow.
So 1987 is the second year of Agape. So something was concerning me, and I decided to meditate. I split from Michael, and I'm looking at Michael meditate. And I said, he doesn't have anything to worry about. I'm with him like that. And then I blended back into Michael. Now, the difference between the two experiences, in 1979, I was more identified with Michael on the couch, nervous. 1987, integration had begun.
Huh.
I was more integrated with the onlooker looking at Michael. So now we're in 2024, so there's been a lot more integration, so it's not a matter of me like getting high, it's just a matter of me, going in and being myself and letting the energy flow through, letting the higher self which is me, which is you, you're not separate from yourself, even though there may be blocks and fears and beliefs that may keep it away from time to time. So that's real transformation. Transformation is integration. So I always tell people, you don't, meditate to get high. You don't go to a spiritual community to get high. You don't do plant medicine to get high. Whatever your mode is, you're doing it to get free, not to get high, but to get free from the limiting beliefs and perceptions and positionalities so that you can live in a more expanded space, which is not high. It's just you. It's just who you are.
Yeah. It seems interesting to start to consider, which I've been playing with this, although I don't have the integration that you're talking about, but I've been playing with this recognition of the human Mark's experience of emotion, stress, nervousness, whatever that might be. And I'm curious, like, how do you integrate the place where, is it the constant observation of that emotional experience that it can still happen? Is there a place where the nervousness no longer exists because you're recognizing these are just biological responses to human experiences?
Yeah, well, the nervousness and the emotions are coming from a perception. You can't have an emotion without a perception. It's like I knew a guy who's was playing his daughter was playing in the backyard, and a snake was crawling all over her, but she had no understanding as a really young girl that a snake could possibly be dangerous. So she's just playing and cooling. The mother was scared. She had an emotional reaction. So your perception determines your emotional reaction. So you said something very key, and that is, do you observe it? Yes. That's what meditation is. That's what paying attention is. You can observe it, the emotion. And if you combine your observation with an intention, let's say you establish an intention, I want to be a higher version of myself. I want to wake up. I want to be free from the emotional content that's pulling me down. If you establish an intention with observation, we know scientifically there's something called the observer effect, which says whatever it is you observe changes on a subatomic level based on observation alone. Mm-hmm. A watched pot does take longer to heat up than an unwatched pot. That's been proven, So if you observe yourself with an intention, then the emotion, which is the condensation of thoughts and perceptions, begin to disintegrate. Mm-hmm. They start to lose their power. And then you even can get to the root of that fear, which spiritually is always a lie. It's always a lie we believe. We're alone. We live in a field of scarcity. There's all these lies that we have within us. And the reason it's difficult to break through, because what we believe and what our perception is produces experience. And then we say, well, that's my experience, so it must be true, but we're more than experiential beings. And the experience is only a mirror of our belief and perception. So it's like a loop.
Right.
So when you change your belief for real at a deep level, your perception changes, your experience changes. So that does begin with observation, And then there's a lot of other work, There's observation, there's meditation, there's self-talk, there's talking to yourself, there's monitoring what comes out of your mouth, there's writing, reading what you're writing, so you're using all of your senses, your tactile, your visual, your hearing, your spoken word. You can actually write things, you can find something about yourself that you're seeking to heal. And you can write the antidote down for that. I'm Michael, am poised, confident, articulate, and spiritually powerful. All of my needs are always met all the time, And so I can write it, read it, speak it, feel it, until it becomes a part of my subconscious. And then what happens is the ego will speak to you and say, that's not so. You don't have any money. You can't go. You're not confident. And then when you start to hear that, you write what the ego is saying, and then you develop another sentence based on what popped up, and you end up just clearing away your subconscious. This is work.
Right.
It's not like one time.
Right.
It's a continual amount of work that allows you to clean up your
Yeah, it's
emotional
like
content.
we need that same level of presence to each moment. You know, we are in a society where we are marketed these ideas of shortcuts or hacks, but you're right. They're the same level. We need that level of presence and attunement that is really saying, like, what do I want to believe about the world? Is it constructive for what I want to create? Is it, or who I want to be? And I know you're in the movie The Secret, which I think, for people listening or watching, the idea of manifestation, I think, is a really interesting idea, and one that I'm wondering if you can explain what it is, and then how it is, how maybe these things correlate, but how we actually step into a state of manifestation.
Yeah, they definitely correlate. The Secret was a beginning stage of these kind of movies that came out, and it came about primarily out of crisis, because the lady Rhonda Byrne, her father had just died. They were very close. Her husband was divorcing her. They were divorcing. Her life was in shambles. And her daughter brought in a little pamphlet that had some of these ideas in it. And she read the pamphlet and said, how come I didn't learn this in high school? That my belief shapes my reality. Why come I'm 50 something years old? I'm just learning this. So she was a movie producer. So she took her talent to produce movies and gathered up all the teachers who were teaching this type of thing, pulled them into Aspen. There was a meeting in Aspen by most of the teachers. I couldn't attend that meeting, and filmed them. So that became The Secret.
Wow.
And how I got in it was I couldn't go. For some reason, I couldn't make it to the Aspen filming. She was flying from Aspen to Australia, but she had a layover in Los Angeles. It was a long layover. So she started to go to this place called Agape International Spiritual Center, which was my space. And she walks in and I'm speaking. So she runs up to me after and she says, oh, you're Michael Beckwith. I said, yes. She says, oh, I wanted you in my movie, The Secret. And I said, what movie? She said, The Secret. Bob Proctor said that you should be in it. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it. I couldn't. She says, well, can we just do it? She said, I have my director here. I have green screen. I have all this stuff. I said, okay.
Oh, wow.
So it just kind of happened like that. And she's asking me questions. I'm going to get to your question in a second.
Yeah.
And then after I'm teaching for a while, she says, you know what? I'm not going to ask you any more questions. Just talk, just teach. And then, whatever made the cut in the movie. And, so that was one of the beginning movies. Millions of people had an opportunity to see it or read the book. And so it was beginning. Those were beginning. It was like she used all of her prowess in making movies to have a soundtrack and the way it was marketed and everything like that. But it was a beginning. It wasn't like the end all. It's just the beginning stage. Let people know that they can participate in their own destiny. Mm-hmm. That your thinking does make a difference. Your belief does make a difference. The feeling that you hold about yourself and about life, it does make a difference. Then other movies have subsequently come out to go into a little bit more about the science, go a little deeper. What the belief do we know? I've been in 40 movies,
Wow.
And I didn't even know it until I got an award from the Illuminate Film Festival a few years ago. And they had gone through and tracked all the movies all these teachers were in. And I said, what? I've been in all these movies? And they said, so we're giving you an award for lending your time to spreading the news about the spiritual principles. I said, wow. Anyway, manifestation, manifestation simply means that you're bringing something something that was invisible into the visible. Your thoughts are units of mental energy. They can now be measured scientifically. Your thoughts can be measured: alpha, theta, delta, gamma, beta. So a chronic thought actually shifts your speech, your behavior, your perception, your actions, and creates manifestation. It's not magic, you see. And so so many people in the beginning stages of learning how to manifest, they want to manifest what they think society wants them to have, something they've seen on the commercial. I want a red car. My parents wanted me to do this. Their wants are somewhat immature.
Mm-hmm.
However, it still teaches them that there's a law to the universe that will ultimately match your thought and your feeling and the words and your actions that you manifest. But ultimately, high form of manifestation is the unfoldment of your soul. You're just manifesting stuff, but you're actually becoming a greater version of yourself.
Mm.
I call that true manifestation, because it is possible for people to manifest, money, things, but not change. So you end up with become addicted to manifesting stuff, but at their core, they haven't really evolved as a being. They haven't become more peaceful, more loving, more forgiving, more compassionate, more creative. They're just manifesting stuff. And then it becomes a sea of unhappiness because they have all this stuff, but they're not happy. They don't have joy. They have to manage all this stuff. They want to be a celebrity. They want to be famous, and so people end up growing and realize, it's not about fame. It's not about money. It's not about stuff. It's really about how are you going to unleash your potential as a being? And then the other stuff does come. But it's best to have that stuff when you're mature. Because we see all these people in the news that are billionaires that just, drug overdose, sexual abuse. They do all this stuff. Not all of them, but, there's a lot of people who have a lot of money that have the power of manifestation, but their soul has shrunk. And then they become addicted to fame, or they become addicted to things. So manifestation takes you through how to manifest. How is it? The law of manifestation, that word is a linguistic convenience because it looks like you're attracting something to yourself. Actually, when you start to feel and inwardly see that you already have it, you evoke the law of resonance. There's a resonance. You start to feel that I already have it, you see. And then that emerges as the law of radiation. You start to radiate that quality. You're not attracting it. You're radiating it. You walk into a room, you're radiating peace. You're radiating love. You're radiating abundance. And then that opens up the door to the law of emergence. That is something that's already within you begins to emerge. It's like a rose bush seed doesn't attract a rose. The rose emerges from the seed. So the law of attraction is a linguistic convenience that moves you through resonance, radiance, and emergence. And so if a person just takes those four things and learns to train oneself to feel, and everyone, first of all, everyone can't visualize. Visualizing a certain part of the population, that's not their gift. But everyone can feel. So you feel. What does prosperity feel like? You feel it. You can have some images to it. That's poster board stuff. You can see it. And then that feeling, you start to have a resonance with it. And then you start to radiate that feeling. Even before manifestation, even before something shows, you're radiating it. And then something within you emerges. More of you shows up. You're compelled to right action. Your speech changes. Coincidences happen. Serendipity happens. You meet different kinds of people. And then you're manifesting a different life. It's not magic, even though it feels magical at times, Yeah.
Is that the manifestation of, because you were talking about the manifestation of did you say the soul's progression or the soul's?
Yeah, your soul's unfoldment. Yeah, we are a living soul, a multidimensional, infinite living soul that is there's so much within us. We have to give it the right condition to flourish and to come forward. The same way that you plant a seed in the soil, you put the seed in the soil, that condition is the right condition. The gift of that seed will emerge. So the work that we do, whether it's meditation, study, going to a spiritual community that's authentic, has a high frequency, you're becoming the vibrational condition for the seed of excellence that's within you to come forward. It's not coming outside of yourself. It's actually coming from within you. You. It's the real you coming forward. Yeah.
So when you were letting go of things like selling marijuana and really getting into alignment, like, is that, like, to me, it feels like, I just want to make sure it's not some sort of more moralized idea. And I'm curious your thoughts on it is this about getting into congruence with the voice, with the calling?
Yeah. Congruence and alignment are really good words. You're coming into alignment with your real self and alignment with the universal presence and its laws. And as you're in alignment, you also get guidance in a language and in a way that you can understand. It could be an intuitive hit, could be a gut feeling. You get guidance, and then your actions change. The guidance turns to action. You actually have inspired action, and sometimes the inspired action is not logical. It's not in your training. Why would you do this? But it's in alignment with what's coming through you now, and it's when I used to spend hours. Even this is after the wake-up call that I had in my garage. I put baffles and mattresses to keep it soundproof. And I'd go in for hours and do inner work on myself. And I'd already seen so much, but I didn't rely on that. I did inner work to actually be able to hold the frequency, even when I was in the world. Even though I didn't have any money, I was able to hold the frequency of feeling that my needs was met, hold the frequency of prosperity, of health, hold it. And then that thing started showing up. Hey, we want you to come speak at this church. I don't have any license. We want you to speak anyway. Different things would happen. I didn't do any, I wasn't marketing it. I mean, now we have marketing, we have all these things, but it wasn't marketing. It was just who I was. That would show up, and what I needed would show up. Yeah.
Does that alignment continue to be divided? Like, once you're in it, are you in it, or is there a continued evolution of what that means? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's always a continue. You can say evolution. I call it unfoldment because this universal presence is infinite, and we are individual expressions of it. So we're infinite. So it's always more.
That makes sense.
It's not an endpoint. Back in the old days, when people talked about enlightenment, they would reference nirvana. I'd go into this nirvanic state, and that's it forever. No, we know that's not so now. There's evolutionary enlightenment, which means, yes, you can have certain states of awareness, but every state is a beginning to more expansion. You see, it's evolutionary. You're an infinite being, so you're always expanding. So we're actually on an adventure to discover, uncover, and activate more of ourselves. And it's after a while it becomes fun because in the beginning stages you're dissolving gross things, really gross things within yourself, and then it becomes more and more refined. But it still feels gross because you're more sensitive. But it becomes more and more refined, and oftentimes it actually feels like you're going backwards. But you're not. You're just more sensitive to the nuances that are within you that you can now see that you couldn't see before because you were dealing with gross things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like your own tolerance for incongruence. You get more sensitized to small incongruences because, and they what was the word they used? They're like, not stink more, but they're like,
they're just, you're able to see them.
You're more sensitized.
You're more sensitized to it. It's like if you have a suit and somebody drives by and it splashes water and mud on you and the whole suit is just dirty and you put it in the clean, it's gross, it's dirty. So you put it in the cleaners. It comes back, it's clean, except for one little spot. You notice that spot.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have noticed that spot before in the middle of all that mud. But you noticed it when the mud is gone. So as we keep growing and unfolding, there are things we don't notice about ourselves. But as we keep purifying, then we notice the little spots. But they seem big.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So so it's a continual growth,
Yeah. Cause I think at least in my experience, it's like, wait, I thought it was supposed to get easier. There's almost like I go into that victim thought of like, I thought it was going to be easier. And I go there for a moment and then I'm like, okay, this is the work.
Well,
what do you think?
Two things on that. One, it's okay to say to yourself, with ease and grace, I'm going to unfold. You might as well load that in.
Yeah, you might as well add some qualifiers.
You might add some qualifiers. But this is what happens, though. It's like, imagine, okay, here's your state of awareness. I'm just doing a little circle. It's actually a spiral like that. So let's say you're in this spiral, but then you have an insight, an awareness that, you grow. So then the spiral expands. But what happens is when the spiral expands, the things within you that cannot be tolerated by the higher frequency come up to be released.
Mm.
So sometimes a bad day for the ego is really a good day for the soul.
Oh, that's
because when it's come up, you say, oh my God, it's hard. I thought I was finished with this stuff. But that was buried and it was able to be sustained by your previous consciousness. But now that you've evolved, it comes up to be released, but it feels like you're going backwards, but you're actually going forward.
Oh, damn. That's fire. A bad day for an ego is a good day for the soul.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I think all of us.
So you don't judge yourself. Recently I was at a place called BioCybernaut. Just got back last week. It's a technology where we put on polygraph equipment and brain mapping equipment, biofeedback for the brain. And you go into a chamber and you meditate. You could be working on alpha, you could be working on theta, you can be working on delta. So you get this feedback and the polygraph is telling you what to work on when you go into meditation.
Oh, wow.
You need to forgive so-and-so. You have a lot of fear about this. There's some loneliness in you. It could be anything. There's a number of things that could come up from your polygraph. So when you go in, you may go in, so it's time to forgive my ex-girlfriend or my ex-boss or something like that. So you go to the higher state of awareness because you're getting feedback. You know when you're there and you know when you're not there. You get over 50 inputs a second. If you fall out of meditation, the sound stops. You fall back in, the sound increases. I'm just giving you a quick. So you're in there and you're doing this forgiveness work, and your brain waves change. You've done the work. Now, generally on the third day, it's a 7-day program. It happened to me at third and fourth day. It felt excruciating, like I was going backwards. All of this stuff was coming up. And so the facilitator, James Hart is his name, you see your brainwaves. He shows them to you. So at the moment I thought I wasn't producing any alpha waves, he showed me on the screen that I had broke my own personal record. But the ego was attacking me, trying to make me feel that I was going backwards so I would give up.
As you were cracking and
as I was cracking.
Damn.
Because again, the ego does not want you to hang out in the unknown.
Yeah.
So sometimes your bad days are preceding a moment of a breakthrough. You're about to have a breakthrough. You've been reading, you've been studying, you've been meditating, and you're on the verge of a breakthrough, of a new insight, and then the ego will come and give you all these emotions will come up. Oh, this is terrible. I thought it was going to be easier. I'm just going to give up. I actually on the day 4 felt defeated inside, but I know the tricks of the ego, so I know what's going on, and then I have proof when they show me my brainwaves.
Wow.
See? So this is a part of growth. You look at the Buddha. When the Buddha was achieving enlightenment, he teaches that his bones felt like they were cracking. He had so much pain because he was about to break through. The metaphor of the crucifixion, the human is just being killed.
Yeah.
You know, before there's a whole proving of eternal life, you know.
That makes sense, that the metaphor of the death, like even though it's metaphorical or it's not literal mortality, it is mortality of the ego, of the self, of the limitations.
Yeah. That's being killed off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's being crucified. It's being crossed out. So he could go, ta-da.
Michael, I want to be mindful of your time. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I just learned so much, and it's such an honor to be in your company, to actually be able to have a conversation with you. And I've been such a fan of your wisdom and your mission, because throughout every experience in the external human world of news and all the things that happen, you have held a reference point of love. And that's a really beautiful thing to know, that we could be pulled out of all these things, but what you've always held the frequency no matter what. And so I appreciate all the spiritual hygiene work that you've done. And
that's what it is. Yeah. It's inner hygiene. Yeah. And you know, my awareness is that the highest vibration always wins eventually. And the highest vibration is love. It's very potent. I'm aware that there's no judgmental God, that when you cross over, you're not judged. You're in a field of love. You judge yourself based on how you made other people feel. You're judging yourself, but there's no judgment God, you know? And so I just try to encourage people to the best of their ability to live a life of love, generosity, forgiveness, particularly, and even when it's really, really hard to do so. Because it's not an easy, having a spiritual being having a human incarnation is not easy. It's you know, it's dense 3D stuff, you know. And so, but if we just practice, whatever a person's religious background is, if they just practice the spiritual practices within that religion, not get caught up in the religion, they will grow. If you're a Buddhist, you're a mystical Christian, Judaism, Hindu, Islam, it all carries the same inner technologies to break free. Just don't get caught up in the transportation to transformation. Transportation might be the religion, the practices. Just don't get caught up in that.
Right.
Get caught up in where you're going, which is freedom.
Amen. Well, for all those people listening or watching, where can they find more of you?
They can, if you're in the LA area or you want to live stream, I speak 3 times every Sunday at agapelive.com. We have our own YouTube channel, my own YouTube channel on Facebook. You can watch the services and you can register for classes at agapelive.com. I have my podcast, which is called Take Back Your Mind. I have wonderful, beautiful friends of mine. We have great conversations like you and I are having right now, according to their particular gifted area. So that would be it, the podcast. My own website is michaelbeckwith.com, and it's just being rebuilt. So don't judge it right now, under construction, but it's getting better. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's how you find me.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for being with you. It's been great.